Now there's another caution I want to give you. We have praise teams. We have worship teams. Everybody knows that. If you have a chance to talk to Kirk Franklin, he will tell you these words. He says, Bishop Wagner was the guy that he calls me the minister that made worship music acceptable among black people. He said that he could take worship and take it to such a place that people would be running and speaking in tongues. Well, it wasn't me. It was how we would bring God into the midst. If you ever talk to him, he'll tell you that. He'll tell you about how that happened. I believe in worship music, but you have to know what the service is. Praise and worship is all right, but when the devil show up in the church, praise and worship won't get him out. Praise and worship is designed to bring God down, but God cannot come down until you get the devil out of there. When I'm in Calvary, and they've had their praise and worship, and they have praised, and we've raised our hands, and we've gone back and forth, and I see the devil sitting up in there. I step to the podium, and I give the musician a sign to hit the organ a moment. And then after I do that, true, this is absolutely what happens. I tell a sister, in fact, she came here from Georgia. I'll say, Linda, go get me the praise instrument. Linda Daniels will go in the closet and bring me out a scrub board. I said, then I called for a couple other folk who know how to play the tambourine. Now, some of y'all cannot play it. Somebody got to know how to play it. You see, I come from a place. I come from a place where they could play the tambourine, brother, and make that thing talk. And they would get to playing it. One brother go all on his elbow. And they get to playing that thing. I call for them. And then I tell them, now what you all were doing wrong, you just singing these songs you rehearse, not seeing the devil's up in here. But you have to get ready now. And you have to have mother. Sometime I'll call for one of the mothers to come up. Years ago, she might weigh about 352. I called for one of the mothers to come up. She would come up grabbing her white dress. And I'd say, take it, mother. And she would begin to just say, drive him away, Lord. And we would switch into it. Drive old Satan away. So, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta go. So here you have to see that you have to get ready to make room for promise. Ladies and gentlemen, as you now move, God has promised you health and wealth. God has promised you eternal salvation. God has promised you freedom and equality. And God has promised you a new and a better life. This can only happen when you receive the Holy Ghost. Watch now, I did not say receive the baptism of the Holy Ghost. That's those books you're reading. People who got the Holy Ghost late, they didn't get the Holy Ghost when we got the Holy Ghost. Not receive the baptism of the Holy Ghost. The baptism is simply the baptizer. You need the Holy Ghost. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, when you get the Holy Ghost, God will speak through you. I'm talking about the old Holy Ghost. I'm not talking about this one where folk got to tell you what to say. I'm talking about the old Holy Ghost. Now, I'm not teasing you. Young people would sound like they say, "Oh, he's really funny." I'm not teasing you. In the church that we grew up in, if you got down and you were tired and you started making up a tongue, she come in a car, and the mothers, listen now, this is not a metaphor, this actually happened. the mother would take her hand and slap you upside your head. And she would say, baby, God don't need no help. You had to stay there until you were filled with the Holy Ghost. Now, hear me. So the Holy Ghost has got to be a part of the apostolic church. It can only be if we can understand clearly Jesus. The key is not the baptism, and the key is not the tongues. You don't have to try to make up tongues. Ladies and gentlemen, when I go to the shoe store and I tell them that I want a size 9 shoe, they pull out the shoe. When they pull out the shoe, the tongue comes with it. I don't have to ask them for the tongue. It comes with the shoe. You don't have to ask for the tongues. Just receive the Holy Ghost. And so, ladies and gentlemen, when you receive the Holy Ghost, the tongues will come. Now, I'm trying to pace myself to this end, but I want you to hear this and understand this. When you receive the Holy Ghost, you receive the promise of God. Now, you got to make room for promise. A promise cannot have his full place in your heart if you got a lot of other junk in your heart. You got to make room for promise. You're going to have to clean the house. Promise cannot occupy your mind when you said this is the way we do it in the AFL or the Eastern Stars. It won't work. It won't work. You have got to make room for promise. Promise will not be able to have her perfect work when you keep waiting on your ship to come in. You've got to get a strategy and build a canoe and go out and get your ship. Glory to heaven. There has to be a working strategy. You can't expect to be healed if you're in a church that doesn't preach it. You get what you preach. Whatever you sow, that's what you will reap. Glory to heaven. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the other Sunday, I wanted to make sure that people got out to vote. And I had to preach voting. They had to see how it is. Somebody said, well, how do you do that? God's always been in charge. God selects the king and determines who he wants in office. But the saints have got to respond to God. So now we have come to see here, ladies and gentlemen, that when you receive the Holy Ghost, you receive the intellect of God. The Holy Ghost is the intellect of God. Intellect talks about mental ability. It is the ability to think it and it'll happen. It's the ability to think it and it will come to pass. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you have to think that God's going to use you. You have to think that God's going to get in your hand. You have to think that God's going to shower you down with blessings. And the Holy Ghost is the intellect of God. The Holy Ghost reveals to you what God is thinking at that time. Where in the world is God?